In 1919, the Indian independence movement abandoned its long-standing request for greater self-governance and adopted an uncompromising demand: the complete departure of the British from India. Before this turning point, prominent Indian leaders largely operated under the assumption that they could negotiate their way to equal rights. They held on to a belief in British benevolence, trusting the imperial legal system to eventually grant them freedom. But in March 1919, the British imperial government passed the Rowlatt Act. This sweeping legislation stripped away civil liberties, allowing authorities to imprison anyone suspected of anti-colonial activities without a trial. Outrage quickly spilled into the streets of Punjab. On April 10th, authorities arrested two prominent pro-independence leaders, Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal, moving them to a secret location. Infuriated citizens marched to demand their release, and police responded with force, killing several protesters in the resulting clashes. 2 days later, Brigadier General Reginald Dyer arrived in Amritsar to restore order. He immediately enforced martial law, strictly restricting civilian movement and banning all public gatherings of more than 4 people. The implementation of martial law and the suspension of basic legal rights turned the region into a political powder keg. A violent confrontation between the local populace and the British military was now all but guaranteed. On the afternoon of April 13th, a massive crowd of 10,000 to 20,000 men, women, and children walked into a public garden known as Jallianwala Bagh. While some in the garden were political activists protesting the recent arrests, the vast majority were simply ordinary citizens. Many were pilgrims from surrounding villages who had come to Amritsar to celebrate Baisakhi, a major Sikh spring festival. Jallianwala Bagh was not an open park. It was a walled public space surrounded by tall brick structures on nearly all sides, with only a handful of extremely narrow passages leading in and out. Upon hearing of the massive gathering, General Dyer marched a detachment of Gurkha and Sikh infantrymen directly into the compound, immediately ordering his troops to block the main exit. He issued no warning to the dense crowd. He gave them no opportunity to disperse or surrender. The deliberate blocking of the only viable escape route, combined with the absolute lack of warning, made the military's intent clear. They were not there to control a crowd. They were there to inflict massive casualties. The shooting lasted for 10 unrelenting minutes. Dyer explicitly directed his men to fire exactly where the crowd was thickest, and toward the narrow exits where panicked families were trying to escape. The soldiers maintained a mechanical, continuous fire, discharging roughly 1,650 rounds into the unarmed civilians, until they nearly ran out of ammunition. In the terror and confusion, dozens of people hurled themselves into a deep well located inside the compound, making a desperate and fatal attempt to avoid the bullets. This chart compares the official casualty reports following the massacre. While British authorities place the final death toll at a precise 379, independent Indian investigations later indicated that well over 1,000 people were killed. When the shooting finally stopped, Dyer and his troops withdrew from the garden. They left behind thousands of dead and dying civilians, offering absolutely no medical assistance. The calculated brutality of the attack, followed by the complete abandonment of the victims, shattered any remaining belief that the British Empire was a civilized, benevolent governing force. In the weeks that followed, the British government imposed a series of humiliating punishments on the Indian residents of Amritsar, which only served to further enrage and unite the broader population. The Bengali poet and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore publicly renounced his British knighthood, writing to the government that the severity of the attacks was without parallel in the history of civilized governments. For Mahatma Gandhi and the Indian National Congress, the massacre proved that negotiating with the empire was no longer viable. Their political strategy shifted permanently from seeking concessions to demanding total independence. As a direct political consequence of the atrocity, Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement in 1920, mobilizing millions of citizens across the subcontinent in massive nonviolent resistance. Today, the site of the massacre serves as a solemn national memorial. The red brick walls still carry the preserved bullet marks, standing as physical proof of the sacrifice made by ordinary people. The 10 minutes of gunfire at Jallianwala Bagh catalyzed a massive, unified resistance. It broke the empire's moral authority and set the irreversible stage for the eventual end of the British Raj in 1947.